How to become the person you pretend to be online. There is a quiet moment that happens to almost everyone, usually late at night, when the world is silent and the noise of the day finally fades, and you find yourself scrolling through your own profile, reading your own words, watching your own stories, seeing the person you present to the world, and feeling something heavy settle in your chest because the person you see online feels more confident, more disciplined, more inspired, more alive than the one sitting alone in that room. And in that moment, a painful question appears. Uninvited, but unavoidable. Why does the version of me on the screen feel more real than the version of me in my life? Think about this for a moment. You post about growth, about discipline, about purpose, about becoming more than you are yet. When the screen goes dark, the motivation fades. The habits collapse, and the gap between who you claim to be and who you actually are begins to feel unbearable. But here's what no one tells you. That discomfort you feel is not proof that you are fake. It is proof that something inside you is trying to wake up. Carl Jung once spoke about the persona, the social mask we wear to function in the world, and he warned that when we identify too strongly with this mask, we become estranged from our true self, not because the mask is false, but because it is incomplete, because it represents only what we show, not what we live. And today, in the digital age, the persona has evolved. Your online identity is a projection of who you sense you could become. Not a lie, but a preview. Now ask yourself this: if that version of you were impossible, why would it feel so familiar? Friedrich Nietzsche believed that human suffering comes not from weakness, but from unrealized potential, from the tension between what we are and what we could be, and when that tension is ignored, it turns into resentment, anxiety, and quiet self-disgust. And this is the hidden cost of pretending. Not that you deceive others, but that you slowly begin to lose respect for yourself. Because every time you post a value, you don't live. Every time you speak confidence, you haven't embodied. Every time you inspire others while neglecting your own discipline, something inside you fractures just a little more. Napoleon Hill described this as drifting, living without a definite purpose, allowing identity to remain theoretical rather than practiced. And he warned that drifting feels comfortable at first, but hollow over time. But here's the truth most people miss. You don't become authentic by deleting the mask. You become authentic by growing into it. Alan Watts often reminded us that the ego is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a tool to be understood. And that suffering arises when we confuse the map for the territory, the idea of ourselves for the lived experience of being. Your online self is a map. Your real life is the territory. The pain you feel exists because the two are out of alignment. Now, think about this carefully. What if the person you pretend to be online is not a lie, but a responsibility? Viktor Frankl believed that meaning is not found through pleasure or comfort, but through responsibility, through choosing who you will be in the face of suffering, and living as if your actions mattered. And this is where the shift begins. Not with motivation, not with confidence, but with integrity. Integrity is not perfection. Integrity is alignment. It is the quiet decision to reduce the distance between what you express and what you embody. Not all at once, but one action at a time. Carl Jung called this process individuation. The slow, often painful integration of unconscious potential into conscious life, where the goal is not to become ideal, but whole. And wholeness requires courage. Because becoming the person you pretend to be online means giving up excuses, giving up comfort, and most importantly, giving up the fantasy that growth happens without sacrifice. But here's what no one tells you. The gap between your words and your actions is not something to be ashamed of. It is a compass. It shows you exactly where your growth is required. Now ask yourself, what is one small behavior that the person you present online would never tolerate? Is it inconsistency? Avoidance? Lack of discipline? Self-betrayal? You don't need to fix your whole life. You need to stop lying to yourself in small ways. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote that becoming who you are is not a destination, but a demand. Most people fail not because they lack strength, but because they lack the courage to endure the discomfort of transformation. Transformation feels lonely, because when you stop pretending and start practicing, You lose the applause of fantasy and gain the silence of effort. But something remarkable happens in that silence. Your self-respect begins to return. Slowly, quietly, powerfully. Napoleon Hill emphasized that identity is shaped through repeated thought and action, not intention, and that the subconscious mind does not respond to what you wish, but to what you do consistently, which means every aligned action, no matter how small, is a vote for the person you want to become. And this is where freedom begins. Not when you finally feel ready, but when you act, despite not feeling ready. Alan Watts would say that life is not something you figure out and then live. It is something you live. And through living, you discover. So stop waiting to feel authentic. Authenticity is a byproduct of action. Now, pause for a moment. Imagine what your life would feel like if your online identity and your daily habits slowly began to merge. If your words carried weight because they were backed by lived experience, if your confidence was no longer performative but grounded, if you no longer feared being exposed because there was nothing to expose, that is not a fantasy. That is a path, a demanding one, but a real one. And the path does not ask you to become extraordinary overnight. It asks you to be honest today. Honest about your limits, honest about your fear, honest about your responsibility. Carl Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but he never said it would be comfortable. And perhaps that is the final truth. You are not pretending because you are fake. You are pretending because you are unfinished, and the pain you feel is not hypocrisy. It is invitation, so take the mask seriously, not as a performance, but as a promise, and begin closing the gap. One action, one habit, one honest choice at a time. Because the moment your life starts reflecting your words, something profound happens. You stop seeking validation. You stop fearing exposure. You stop pretending. And you start becoming. If this message spoke to you, subscribe to Becoming You and keep growing with us. And if you watched until the end, comment the word alignment below and share what resonated most with you.